The shuttle docked at Station Velcora with a soft hum, and Jake Harris picked up his bag and walked toward the exit. Through the window, he could see the massive space station stretching out in every direction. Lights blinked from thousands of windows. Ships moved in and out of dozens of docking ports. This was the Galactic Military Academy, and Jake was one of the few humans ever accepted into its advanced combat program. He stepped off the shuttle and into a wide corridor filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. A group of tall, blue-skinned Valorians walked past him without a glance. A pair of Dralis soldiers, their scaled bodies covered in natural armor, laughed at something as they moved toward the training sector. Jake kept his head down and followed the signs toward the registration office. He had been warned about this place. Humans were not common here. Most species in the galaxy saw humans as weak, fragile, and short-lived. They did not have claws or fangs. They did not have thick skin or multiple limbs. On paper, humans seemed like the worst possible candidates for military training. But Jake had spent his whole adult life proving that paper did not tell the whole story. Back on Earth, he had worked as a martial arts instructor. He had trained soldiers, police officers, and civilians. He had studied dozens of fighting styles from around the world. When the opportunity came to join the exchange program at the Galactic Military Academy, he had taken it without hesitation. He wanted to learn. He wanted to see what the rest of the galaxy had to offer. And maybe, if he was lucky, he could show them a thing or two in return. The registration office was a small room, staffed by a bored-looking alien with gray skin and 4 eyes. Jake handed over his documents and waited while the alien processed them. "Human," the alien said, looking at him with mild curiosity. "You are the third one this cycle. The other 2 dropped out already." Jake nodded. "I heard. The combat program is not designed for your species. The instructors will not slow down for you. If you cannot keep up, you will be removed. I understand." The alien handed him a datapad with his room assignment and class schedule. "Good luck, human. You will need it." Jake took the pad and left without another word. He had heard worse. His room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a storage unit for his belongings. Nothing fancy, but it was enough. He unpacked his bag and checked his schedule. His first class was tomorrow morning. Advanced blade training with instructor Velrath. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find a young woman with short brown hair and a friendly smile. She wore the same cadet uniform as him, with a communications badge on her shoulder. "You must be Jake," she said. "I am Amy Collins. I work in the communications office here. I heard we had a new human arriving today, so I wanted to say hello." Jake shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Amy. How long have you been here?" "About 2 years now. I am not in the combat program, just support staff. But I know how things work around here." She leaned against the doorframe. "Can I give you some advice?" "Sure. Keep your head down for the first few weeks. The other cadets will test you. They will try to make you angry or scared. Do not give them what they want. And whatever you do, be careful in Velrath's class. He is one of the best blade masters in the quadrant, but he does not have much patience for species he considers weak." Jake nodded slowly. "Thanks for the warning." Amy smiled. "We humans have to look out for each other. Come find me if you need anything." She left, and Jake sat on his bed, thinking about what she had said. He was not worried about the other cadets. He had dealt with bullies before, but he was curious about this instructor Velrath. Jake had learned long ago that the best teachers were not always the kindest ones, but a good teacher knew how to push students without breaking them. He would have to wait and see which kind Velrath was. The next morning, Jake arrived at the training hall early. It was a massive room with high ceilings and smooth floors. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with blades of every shape and size. A few other cadets were already there, stretching and talking among themselves. Most of them were Kethrani, a species with 4 arms and lean, muscular bodies built for combat. They moved with natural grace, their limbs flowing like water. Jake found a spot near the back and began his own warm-up routine. He stretched his legs, rolled his shoulders, and moved through a few basic stances. Nothing flashy, just enough to get his blood flowing. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see a large Dralith cadet staring down at him. The Dralith had dark green scales and eyes like a predator. "You are the human," the Dralith said. It was not a question. That is right. "I am Torvik. I heard humans are soft, easy to break." He grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "We will see if that is true." Jake stood up slowly, meeting the Dralith's gaze without flinching. "I guess we will." Torvik laughed and walked away, joining a group of his friends near the weapon racks. Jake watched him go, keeping his face calm. He had met people like Torvik before. They wanted a reaction. They wanted fear or anger. Jake would give them neither. A door at the far end of the hall opened, and Instructor Velrath entered. He was tall, even for a Kethrani, with 4 powerful arms and a face marked by old scars. He moved with the confidence of someone who had won 1,000 fights and expected to win 1,000 more. "Attention," Velrath called out, and every cadet in the room snapped to position. "Today we begin blade training. You will learn to fight, to defend, and to survive. Those who cannot keep up will be removed. There are no exceptions." He gestured toward the weapon racks. "Each of you will select a training blade. We begin with demonstrations." Jake walked toward the racks with the other cadets. He picked up one of the training blades and immediately felt the weight. It was heavy, much heavier than it should have been for a practice weapon. He looked around and noticed that some of the smaller cadets were struggling with theirs as well. He approached Velrath and spoke in a respectful tone. "Instructor, these weapons seem calibrated for heavier species. Some cadets might have difficulty handling them safely." Velrath looked down at him with cold eyes. "If they cannot handle the weight, they do not belong here. Return to your position, human." Jake nodded and stepped back. He had tried. Now all he could do was watch and wait. The cadets gathered in a wide circle around the training area. Velrath stood in the center, his 4 arms moving through a series of complex blade patterns. The demonstration was impressive. Beautiful, even. But Jake could not shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Instructor Velrath finished his demonstration and lowered his blades. The cadets watched in silence, many of them still amazed by the speed and power of his movements. His 4 arms had moved like a storm, each blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. It was clear why he was considered one of the best in the quadrant. "Now," Velrath said, his voice echoing through the training hall, "we will see what you are capable of. Who will volunteer first?" Torvik stepped forward immediately, his chest puffed out with pride. "I will, Instructor." Velrath nodded. "Good. Show us what the Dralith can do." Torvik picked up a training blade and moved to the center of the ring. He took a wide stance, his scaled muscles tensing beneath his uniform. Then he began to move. His strikes were powerful and fast, each one landing with enough force to crack stone. He spun and slashed, putting on a show for the other cadets. When he finished, several of his friends clapped and cheered. Velrath watched with a neutral expression. "Adequate. You have strength, but you waste energy. A skilled opponent would tire you out and strike when you are weak." He turned to scan the rest of the cadets. "Next, you." He pointed at a young Kethrani female standing near the edge of the circle. She was smaller than the others, with thin arms and nervous eyes. She stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a training blade. Jake recognized fear when he saw it. This cadet was not ready. She was younger than the others, probably pushed into the program before she was prepared. He watched as she struggled to lift her blade, the weight clearly too much for her frame. "Your name?" Velrath demanded. "Zaranik, instructor." "Zaranik. You will spar with Torvik." A murmur went through the crowd. Jake felt his stomach tighten. This was a mistake. Torvik was twice her size and had years more experience. Pairing them together was not a test. It was a punishment. Zaranik looked at Torvik with wide eyes. The Draloth grinned and raised his blade, rolling his shoulders. "Do not worry, little one. I will try not to hurt you too badly." Velrath raised his hand. "Begin." Torvik moved first. He charged forward with a heavy overhead strike, his blade slicing down toward Zaranik's head. She raised her weapon to block, but the impact sent shockwaves through her arms. She stumbled backward, barely keeping her balance. Torvik did not give her time to recover. He swung again and again, each strike harder than the last. Zaranik tried to defend herself, but her technique was falling apart. Her grip was wrong. Her footwork was sloppy. Every mistake Jake had noticed earlier was now on full display. "Fight back," Velrath commanded. "Show me something." Zaranik tried. She lunged forward with a desperate thrust, but Torvik easily knocked her blade aside. He countered with a brutal swing that caught her on the shoulder. The training blade was supposed to be dulled, but the force of the blow was enough to cause real damage. Jake heard a sickening pop as her shoulder dislocated from the impact. Zaranik cried out and collapsed to the floor. Her blade clattered away from her, and she clutched her arm against her chest. Her face twisted with pain, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Torvik stepped back, his grin fading into confusion. "I did not mean to. The blade is dulled. It should not have." Velrath stood frozen. His forearms hung at his sides, and for the first time since Jake had seen him, the instructor looked uncertain. He stared at Zaranik on the floor, his mind clearly trying to process what had just happened. His teaching methods were strict, but he had never injured a student before. He did not know what to do. The other cadets reacted in different ways. Some whispered nervously to each other. Some looked away, unwilling to watch. A few laughed quietly, as if the whole thing was a joke. None of them moved to help. Jake watched for a few more seconds, waiting to see if anyone would step forward. When no one did, he made his decision. He walked calmly into the center of the training ring, his footsteps steady and quiet. "What are you doing?" Torvik demanded. "This is not your concern, human." Jake ignored him. He knelt beside Zaranik and spoke in a gentle voice. "Can you hear me? My name is Jake. I'm going to help you." Zaranik looked up at him through her tears. Her breathing was fast and shallow, her body shaking from the pain. "It hurts. It hurts so much." "I know. I have seen this injury before. Your shoulder is out of place. I can fix it, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Jake looked up at Velrath. "Instructor, may I have your permission to help her?" Velrath stared at him for a long moment. The pride in his eyes fought against the reality of the situation. Finally, he nodded. "Do what you can." Jake turned back to Zaranik. "I need you to relax as much as possible. Focus on my voice. Take slow, deep breaths. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Good, just like that." He placed one hand on her shoulder and the other on her upper arm. His movements were slow and deliberate, giving her time to prepare. The other cadets watched in silence, their earlier mockery replaced by curiosity. "This is going to hurt for just a moment," Jake said. "But after that, it will feel much better. Are you ready?" Zaranek closed her eyes and nodded. Jake moved with practiced precision. He applied gentle pressure, rotating her arm in a smooth motion while pushing the joint back into place. There was a soft click, and Zaranek gasped. But then her body relaxed, and she let out a long breath. "The pain," she whispered. "It is less now." Jake smiled. "That means it worked. But we need to keep your arm still until the medical team can look at it properly." He removed his jacket and carefully folded it into a makeshift sling. He wrapped it around her arm and tied it behind her neck, immobilizing the shoulder. The whole process took less than a minute, and when he was done, Zaranek looked at him with something close to wonder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No one else was going to help me." Jake helped her to her feet. Anyone would have done the same. "No," she said. "They would not." Jake turned to face the rest of the class. They stared at him with mixed expressions. Confusion, surprise, and in some cases, something that might have been the beginning of respect. Velrath stepped forward, his face hard to read. "You have medical training, human?" "Some," Jake said. "I worked with fighters for many years. Injuries happen. You learn to deal with them." Velrath studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice cold but controlled. "If you think you know so much about training, perhaps you would like to share your wisdom with the rest of us." Jake met his gaze without flinching. "I would be happy to, instructor. If you are willing to listen." The hall fell completely silent. Every cadet held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake stood in the center of the ring, calm and steady, while Velrath loomed over him with centuries of pride burning in his eyes. The tension in the training hall was thick enough to cut with a blade. Jake stood in the center of the ring, facing Instructor Velrath while the other cadets watched from the edges. Zaranek had been taken to the medical bay by two of her classmates, her arm still wrapped in Jake's makeshift sling. Now, it was just Jake and the consequences of his decision to speak up. Velrath crossed his forearms over his chest and stared down at the human with cold eyes. "You said you would share your wisdom." "I am waiting." Jake took a slow breath. He knew he was walking on thin ground. One wrong word could end his time at the academy before it even truly began. But he also knew that staying silent would mean accepting a broken system. He had not come this far to be quiet. "With respect, instructor," Jake began, keeping his voice calm and even, "I noticed 3 problems with this lesson that led to the injury." A few cadets gasped. Torvik laughed out loud. "The human thinks he can teach the teacher. This should be good." Velrath silenced him with a look. Then he turned back to Jake. "Continue." Jake pointed toward the weapon racks. "First, the training blades. They are calibrated for species with denser muscle tissue. Kethrani, Dralith, Valorians. They can handle the weight without difficulty. But smaller cadets, younger cadets, or species with lighter builds cannot maintain proper grip and control. That leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to injuries." Velrath's eyes narrowed, but he did not interrupt. "Second," Jake continued, "the sparring match was uneven. Torvik has years of experience and natural physical advantages. Zaranek is still learning the basics. Putting them together without any rules or restrictions was not a test of skill. It was a guarantee of failure. A good training program matches students of similar levels or creates rules that balance the differences." Torvik stopped laughing. His scales flushed a darker shade of green, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Third," Jake said, "there were no safety protocols in place. No one was assigned to watch for injuries. No medical kit was ready nearby. No signals to stop the match if things went wrong. In a real fight, you do not have those things. But in training, your goal is to make soldiers better, not to break them before they ever reach the battlefield." The hall was completely silent now. Every cadet stared at Jake with wide eyes. No one had ever spoken to Velrath like this. No one had ever dared. Velrath uncrossed his arms slowly. His expression was impossible to read. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took a step closer to Jake, towering over the human with his full height. "You have courage, human. I will give you that much." His voice was low and dangerous. But courage without skill is just noise. If you believe you know a better way, then show us. Demonstrate what human blade technique looks like. It was a challenge. Jake understood that. Velrath wanted to humiliate him in front of the class, to prove that a human had no place telling a Kathrani master how to teach. If Jake refused, he would look like a coward. If he accepted and failed, he would look like a fool. Jake met the instructor's gaze without blinking. "I accept, but I have one request." "Name it." "I would like a training blade that matches my species. Earth standard weight." Velrath hesitated. For a moment, Jake thought he would refuse. Then the instructor gestured to one of the cadets near the weapon racks. "Find something appropriate." A few minutes later, a lighter blade was brought forward. It was still not a perfect match for human design, but it was close enough. Jake tested the weight in his hand, moving through a few basic swings to get a feel for the balance. "Adequate," he said. Velrath stepped back to the edge of the ring. "Show us what you can do, human. Impress me if you can." Jake moved to the center of the training floor and took a neutral stance. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. Then he began to move. His technique was different from anything the cadets had seen before. Where the Kathrani style relied on power and overwhelming speed, Jake's movements were smooth and economical. Every step had a purpose. Every swing flowed into the next without wasted energy. He moved like water, shifting from offense to defense and back again in a seamless rhythm. He demonstrated blocks, parries, and counterattacks. He showed how to redirect an opponent's force instead of meeting it head-on. He explained each movement as he performed it, keeping his words simple and clear. "Humans do not have 4 arms," he said, stepping into a low stance. "We do not have natural armor or claws. So we learn to fight smarter, not harder. We use balance, timing, and positioning. We wait for our opponent to make a mistake, and then we strike." He moved through a series of quick combinations, his blade flashing in the light. Then he stopped and turned to face the class. But technique is only part of it. The most important thing a fighter can have is awareness. You must know your own limits and your opponent's limits. You must see the whole battlefield, not just the enemy in front of you. And you must always know when to stop. Velrath watched in silence, his expression slowly changing. The anger in his eyes faded, replaced by something that looked almost like curiosity. "Interesting," the instructor said. "But demonstrations mean nothing without application. Can your techniques work against a real opponent?" Jake nodded. "I would be happy to show you, but I suggest we use controlled conditions. Light contact only. First touch wins. That way, no one gets hurt." Velrath considered this for a moment. Then he looked toward Torvik. "You, face the human." Torvik grinned and stepped into the ring. He picked up his training blade and rolled his shoulders. "Finally. I have been waiting for this." Jake raised his weapon and settled into a defensive stance. "Whenever you are ready." Torvik charged. He came in fast and hard, swinging his blade in a wide arc meant to overwhelm any defense. But Jake was not there. He stepped to the side at the last second, letting the strike pass harmlessly through empty air. Then he tapped Torvik lightly on the back with the flat of his blade. "First touch," Jake said calmly. "Point to me." Torvik spun around, his face twisted with anger. "That was luck, again." They reset. Torvik attacked again, this time with a series of quick jabs aimed at Jake's chest. Jake parried each one, deflecting the blade with minimal movement. Then he stepped inside Torvik's guard and tapped him on the arm. Second touch. 2-0. The other cadets began to murmur. Some of them were smiling now. Others looked confused, as if they could not understand how a human was winning against a Dralith. Torvik roared and swung with all his strength. Jake ducked under the strike, caught Torvik's wrist with his free hand, and twisted. The training blade flew out of Torvik's grip and clattered across the floor. The hall fell silent. Jake stepped back and lowered his weapon. The match is over. Torvik stared at him, breathing hard. For a moment, Jake thought the Dralith might attack him with bare hands. But then Torvik looked at the floor and said nothing. Volrath walked slowly into the ring. He stopped in front of Jake and studied him with new eyes. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "On Earth," Jake said. "We do not have natural weapons, so we created our own. Centuries of trial and error. Generations of warriors passing down what they learned. Humanity survived because we adapted." Volrath was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost respectful. "Perhaps I was too quick to judge your species," he said. "You have shown me something today, human. Something I did not expect." Jake bowed his head slightly. "I did not come here to challenge you, instructor. I came here to learn. But I would also like to help, if you would allow it. Together, we could make this program safer and stronger." Volrath considered his words. Then, slowly, he nodded. "We will discuss this further. Class dismissed for today." The cadets began to file out of the hall, talking quietly among themselves. Jake watched them go, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over him. He had taken a risk. A big one. But sometimes, risks were the only way to make things change. 3 weeks had passed since the incident in the training hall, and the changes at the Galactic Military Academy were beginning to take shape. New safety protocols had been put in place. Training blades were now available in multiple weight classes. Sparring matches were carefully monitored, with clear rules about contact levels and stopping conditions. And at the center of it all was an unlikely partnership between a Kethrani blade master and a human. Martial artist Jake stood at the front of the training hall, facing a mixed group of cadets from 6 different species. Volrath stood beside him, his forearms folded across his chest as he watched the lesson unfold. "Today we work on awareness," Jake said. "Not just awareness of your opponent, but awareness of yourselves. Your body, your breathing, your emotional state. A warrior who loses control of their mind will lose control of the fight." He led them through a series of exercises designed to build focus and calm under pressure. Some of the cadets struggled at first, especially the Dralith, who were used to relying on aggression and instinct. But Jake was patient, offering corrections without criticism and encouragement without false praise. After the exercises, they moved into paired sparring. Jake walked among the pairs, watching their technique and offering advice. When he reached Torvik and his partner, he paused to observe. Torvik had changed. He still fought with power and intensity, but there was a new layer of control in his movements. He was thinking now, reading his opponent, adjusting his tactics in real time. When his partner left an opening, Torvik did not simply charge in. He set a trap, drew out a reaction, and then struck with precision. "Good," Jake said. "You are learning." Torvik nodded without breaking his focus. "I had a good teacher." Jake smiled and moved on. Praise from Torvik was rare, and he knew better than to make a big moment of it. At the far end of the hall, he found Zaranik practicing basic forms. Her shoulder had healed fully, and she had returned to training 2 weeks ago. Her confidence was still fragile, but it was growing. She moved through the patterns with careful attention, her grip steady and her footwork clean. Jake watched her finish, then approached. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said. "Stronger. When I first came back, I was afraid of everything. The blades, the sparring, even the other cadets. I thought they would see me as weak. And now?" She looked at him with clear eyes. "Now I understand that fear is not weakness. It is information. It tells me what I need to work on. You taught me that." Jake felt a warmth in his chest. "You taught yourself. I just helped you see what was already there." Zaranek smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her since the day of her injury. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." Before he could respond, a message came through on his datapad. He was being summoned to the Academy Command Center. Commander Cylon wanted to see him immediately. Jake exchanged a look with Velrath, who had received the same message. Together, they left the training hall and made their way to the Command Center. Commander Cylon was an ancient Valorian with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to look through everything and everyone. She was the head of the Academy, and her word was law. When Jake and Velrath entered her office, she gestured for them to sit. "I have been watching your progress," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "The new training program has produced interesting results. Injury rates have dropped significantly. Cadet performance scores have increased. And more importantly, morale has improved across all species groups." Velrath bowed his head slightly. "The credit belongs to Jake Harris, Commander. His ideas have transformed my approach." Cylon turned her gaze to Jake. "I understand you had no formal training in military education before coming here. Only practical experience as a martial arts instructor on your home world." "That is correct, Commander." "And yet, you managed to identify problems that our own instructors had overlooked for decades. You propose solutions that work across multiple species with different physical capabilities. And you did all of this while remaining respectful and collaborative, never seeking to replace or embarrass those with more authority than yourself." Jake was not sure how to respond. "I only did what seemed right." Cylon leaned back in her chair. "That is exactly why I have called you here. The Academy is launching a new initiative, a joint training program that combines combat techniques and safety principles from multiple cultures. We want instructors who can teach adaptation, awareness, and cooperation across species lines. I would like you to lead the program." Jake stared at her. "Me? Commander, I have only been here for a few weeks. There are instructors with decades more experience." "Experience is valuable," Cylon agreed. "But it can also become a cage. Sometimes we need fresh eyes to see what we have been missing." She looked at Velrath. "And you will not be alone. Instructor Velrath has agreed to serve as your partner in this program. Together, you will represent the best of both approaches." Velrath turned to Jake. "I would be honored to work with you. Jake, you have taught me more in 3 weeks than I learned in the previous 10 years. Jake felt the weight of the moment settling over him. This was more than he had ever expected, more than he had ever dreamed. But he also knew that opportunities like this did not come twice. "I accept, Commander. I will do my best to honor your trust." Cylon nodded. "I know you will. That is why I chose you." The meeting ended, and Jake walked out of the command center in a daze. Velrath walked beside him, his expression thoughtful. "You look troubled," the instructor said. "This is good news, is it not?" "It is," Jake admitted. "I just did not expect it. I came here hoping to survive the program. Now I am being asked to help lead it." Velrath chuckled. "That is the nature of life, human. We make plans, and the universe laughs at them. But I think you were meant for this." I think this is why you came to Station Velcora, even if you did not know it at the time. They reached the training hall and stopped outside the doors. Through the windows, Jake could see the cadets still practicing. Their movements, a blend of techniques from a dozen different worlds. Amy appeared beside them, grinning. I heard the news. Lead instructor of a brand new program. Not bad for the human who was supposed to keep his head down. Jake laughed. I guess I never was very good at following advice. No, she agreed. But you were good at making things better. That is what matters. They went inside, and Jake took his place at the front of the hall. The cadets turned to face him, their eyes bright with curiosity and respect. He saw Torvik standing tall among the Dralith. He saw Zaranek holding her blade with steady hands. He saw faces from a dozen species, all of them watching him, waiting for his next words. Jake took a deep breath and smiled. All right, he said. Let us begin. Behind him, Velrath stood with his forearms crossed, a rare smile playing at the corners of his mouth, watching, learning, partnering. And in that moment, Jake understood something that humans had always known but rarely put into words. Strength was not about having the biggest claws or the thickest armor. It was about connection. It was about lifting others up instead of pushing them down. It was about the courage to change and the humility to admit when you were wrong. Humanity had survived against impossible odds for thousands of years. Not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to give up on each other. And now, in a training hall on a space station at the edge of the galaxy, one human was teaching that lesson to the stars. Word spread quickly through Station Velcora. By the next morning, everyone seemed to know about the human who had fixed the injured cadet and then defeated a Dralith warrior in front of the entire Blade training class. Jake noticed the stares as he walked through the corridors. Some were curious. Some were hostile. A few were almost admiring. Amy caught up with him outside the dining hall. You certainly know how to make an impression, she said, falling into step beside him. I told you to keep your head down. You did the exact opposite. Jake shrugged. Someone was hurt. I could not just stand there. Most people would have. Most people do. Amy shook her head, but she was smiling. Well, whatever happens next, at least you made things interesting around here. What happened next came in the form of a message on Jake's datapad. Instructor Velrath wanted to see him in the training hall 1 hour before the next class. No explanation. Just the time and a place. Jake arrived early and found Velrath waiting for him in the center of the empty hall. The instructor stood with his forearms clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. Several training blades were laid out on a table nearby, along with data pads and what looked like safety equipment. You came, Velrath said. You asked me to. Velrath studied him for a moment. I have been teaching at this academy for 47 years. In that time, I have trained thousands of warriors from dozens of species. Some became legends. Some died in their first battle. But I have always believed that my methods were sound. That if a student failed, the fault was theirs, not mine. He paused and looked down at the floor. Yesterday, you showed me I was wrong. Jake said nothing. He could tell the instructor was not finished. I reviewed the records last night, Velrath continued. The injury rate in my classes has been climbing for the past 5 years. Small things at first. Sprains, bruises, minor fractures. I dismissed them as the cost of training. I told myself that warriors must learn to endure pain. He looked up at Jake. But that is not what warriors learn from unnecessary pain. They learn fear. They learn to hold back. They learn that their instructor does not care about their well-being. It is not too late to change, Jake said quietly. No, it is not. Velrath gestured toward the table. I have been thinking about what you said. about weapon calibration and matched sparring and safety protocols. These are not concepts we use in Kethrani training. Our tradition is built on strength and survival. The weak are meant to fail. And how many strong warriors have you lost because they were broken before they could become strong? Velrath was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Too many. Far too many. He picked up one of the data pads and handed it to Jake. I want you to help me design a new training program. One that combines Kethrani blade techniques with the principles you demonstrated yesterday. Adaptation, awareness, safety. If we can make it work, I will propose it to the Academy Command. Jake looked at the datapad, then back at Velrath. You are serious about this? I am. I have my pride, human. Too much of it, perhaps. But I am not so proud that I will let my students suffer for my stubbornness. If your way is better, I want to learn it. Jake felt something shift in his chest. He had expected anger. He had expected resentment. He had not expected this. I would be honored to help, instructor. Good. We begin now. They spent the next several hours going over the training curriculum. Jake shared what he knew about human martial arts philosophy, explaining concepts like controlled sparring, progressive skill building, and injury prevention. Velrath listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. In return, he explained the history and theory behind Kethrani blade techniques, showing Jake the deeper logic behind what had seemed like pure aggression done by the time the first cadets started arriving for class. They had outlined a basic framework for a new approach. It was rough and incomplete, but it was a start. Today's lesson will be different, Velrath announced once all the cadets had assembled. We will be trying some new methods. The human, Jake Harris, will assist me in demonstrating. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake saw surprise on many faces and open hostility on a few. Torvik stood near the back with his arms crossed, his expression dark and unreadable. Jake stepped forward and addressed the class. I know some of you think I do not belong here. I know my species is not respected in this galaxy. But I did not come here to prove that humans are better than anyone else. I came here to learn and to share what I know. Today, I want to show you something that helped my people survive for thousands of years, even though we have no natural weapons or armor. He picked up a training blade and moved to the center of the ring. The first lesson is simple. Before you can defeat an enemy, you must understand yourself. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your limits. Watch. He demonstrated a basic stance, then moved through a slow combination of strikes and blocks. As he moved, he explained what he was doing and why. He talked about balance and center of gravity. He showed how a smaller fighter could use an opponent's momentum against them. He made mistakes on purpose, then corrected them, showing the class that learning was a process of constant improvement. Now I need a partner, Jake said. He looked at Torvik. Would you be willing to help me demonstrate? The hall went quiet. Everyone expected Torvik to refuse, or worse. But after a long moment, the Dralis stepped forward. His face was still hard, but there was something different in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just the desire to hit Jake without consequences. Light contact only, Jake reminded him. We are teaching, not fighting. They began to spar. This time, Jake did not dodge or counter. Instead, he let Torvik attack while he blocked and parried, talking the class through each exchange. See how he commits too much weight to his forward foot? That makes him fast, but it also makes him vulnerable to a trip or a sweep. Torvik, try again, but this time keep your weight more centered. Torvik adjusted his stance and attacked again. This time, his strikes were more controlled, more balanced. Better, Jake said. Now you can move in any direction without losing your stability. They continued for several more minutes, with Jake pointing out techniques and corrections while Torvik demonstrated. By the end, the Dralith was moving differently. Not faster or stronger, but smarter. More efficient. Velroth watched from the side, his forearms folded across his chest. When the demonstration ended, he stepped forward and addressed the class. What you have seen today is the beginning of a new curriculum. Human techniques combined with Kethrani traditions. Some of you will resist this change. Some of you will say that our old ways were better. But I have taught here for almost 50 years, and I have seen enough warriors fall to know that pride alone cannot save you on the battlefield. Adaptation is not weakness. It is survival. He looked at Jake. The human has earned his place in this program. I expect all of you to treat him with the respect he deserves. Dismissed. The cadets filed out slowly, talking among themselves. Many of them glanced at Jake as they passed, their expressions a mix of confusion and grudging interest. A few even nodded at him. Torvik was the last to leave. He stopped in front of Jake and stared at him for a long moment. Then he extended one clawed hand. You fight well, human. Better than I expected. Jake shook his hand. You learn fast. That is more important than natural talent. Torvik nodded once, then turned and walked away. Jake watched him go, feeling something that might have been hope. Change was never easy. It did not happen in a single day or a single lesson. But sometimes, all it took was one moment, one gesture, to start something new. Velreth approached and stood beside him. You did well today. We did well, Jake corrected. This is a partnership, instructor. I could not have done any of this without you. Velroth allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps not. But you were the one who had the courage to speak when others stayed silent. That is a rare quality. He placed one of his 4 hands on Jake's shoulder. I am glad you came to this academy, Jake Harris. I think you have much to teach us. Jake looked out at the empty training hall, thinking about all the work that still lay ahead. But for the first time since he had arrived at Station Velcora, he felt like he truly belonged.